Greetings to everyone. Welcome to my home. I'm Mary Puthawala, and this talk is Walking Through Lent with the Fellowship of the Ring. This is a talk that I wrote. It is in part to fulfill my Lenten obligation. I initially gave it at St. James Church this past Saturday, which was the 18th of March, but in looking at the videos later, they weren't quite up to the quality that we had wanted, so I'm retaping them. So please bear with me. I'm delighted to have you come with me on this journey. I have learned so much, but let's start with a prayer. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. Dear Lord, who created and loved each of us and appointed to us our own mission on earth, we thank you for gathering us together to study your servant JRR Tolkien in this great work. Help us to see you behind the author's shoulder so that we may learn through his incredible faith examples of your love for us as we give ourselves to accomplish your will. In the name of Jesus Christ, we ask this. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Amen. I just adore J.R.R. Tolkien. My husband and I have 6 children, and they watched it. I can't even tell you how many times. I'm talking about the movie. And then I read the book, and the book was even better. So I am just so happy to have you join me. When I went to reserve the room at St. James, I asked Father Charles if I could have it. And he said, well, what are you going to talk about? And I said, The Lord of the Rings. And he said, oh, well, sure, if you think anyone will come. So I was delighted that so many people did come. And there are other Tolkien fans out there. And it's not a surprise. It was just beautiful. So if you've seen the movies, I'll compare the movies to the book. Please be patient with me. The book is 1,000 pages long. The movies are, I think, about 6 hours, not counting the extended version, which I have watched. I've read numerous books about it, and sometimes the details, sometimes I get them a little confused. I might call Bilbo, Frodo, etc. So please be patient with me while we get through this. Okay, I'm going to tell you about the author, J.R.R. Tolkien. His JRR stands for John Ronald Royal Tolkien. He was born in 1892 in South Africa. He had one brother, and when he was 4 years old, his mother took both boys and went to England to visit her family. While they were there, unfortunately, his father passed away in South Africa, so they were kind of left there in England. They moved in with her parents, and they lived in the countryside outside of Birmingham, England. And it was idyllic to Tolkien. He absolutely loved the countryside there, and that land became his model for the Shire. So it was just beautifully rustic and wonderful. There was a pond there with a willow tree beside it, and he used to go and just sit under the willow tree and let his considerable gifted imagination run wild. And then one day somebody came and cut down the willow tree. They didn't even do anything with it. And this, he found, was just so sad. And he just really missed the tree. So I think that shows up through his journeys in Lord of the Rings. When he was 12 years old, actually before that, his mother committed the great sin of becoming Catholic. And to her parents, that was something that was just not acceptable. She moved out of her parents' house, and apparently they stopped supporting her at that point, her and the boys. So they moved to Birmingham. They lived in the very poor section. She homeschooled the boys. Apparently she was very bright. She stimulated his love of words. And to this day, he said her questions about why certain words were ordered as they were, he said, I still can't answer that question that she had. But she was a wonderful woman. When he was 12 years old, though, she passed away, so he and his brother were orphans. Fortunately, she had formed a wonderful relationship with the rector at the Oratory of Birmingham, and his name was Father Francis Morgan. When she passed away, she had left Father Morgan as the guardian of the two boys. So they were raised in the oratory in Birmingham, England, and they grew up very, very strong in their faith. When he got older, when he went to Oxford, and that was assisted by one of the brothers of his father, who didn't quite disown them as the rest of the families had done, but he supported him while he went to school. He finished up at Oxford. He married his childhood sweetheart. Her name was Edith, and they were married for 43 years. And apparently the marriage was very happy. After that, he decided that it was really his duty to enlist in the military because World War I was happening. And he felt that it was his duty to do that. So he did, along with several friends of his. They were in the same battalion, and they were sent to fight the Battle of Somme in France. Well, while he was in the trenches at Somme, he developed trench fever. And he ended up being evacuated back to England before the battle, which was fortunate because he found afterwards that all of his friends had died in that battle. So that exposure to the battlefield really left a terrible mark on him. That recollection of his actually helped form the land of Mordor, which is the evil country in Middle Earth. So that actually had a grounding in his experience. After he recovered, he worked at Oxford, teaching at Oxford, and he was a philologist, who studied words. He was a world expert in Beowulf. He learned several languages, and I guess he ran out of languages he was interested in, so he made up a couple of his own, which we have evidence for in the Lord of the Rings. There's the Elvish language of Kenya, I think you say it, Qenya, Kenya, and the language of Mordor, and I'm sure there were more that he did not, that did not make the book. He had a couple of very close friends after he graduated and started working at Oxford. One of his friends was named C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis is the author of the Chronicles of Narnia, very successful book. And actually, JRR Tolkien was responsible for his leap into Christianity. He was an atheist when Tolkien met him. C.S. Lewis grew up in Northern Ireland, and he couldn't become Catholic. He said that just couldn't happen. And so but he did become Christian. Another one of his friends was G.K. Chesterton. And G.K. Chesterton did cross the Tiber, as they say, and become Catholic. And he became a very well-known author and Catholic apologetic until this day. I mean, his arguments are amazing, even today. Peter Kraft says that Tolkien was a devout Catholic who practiced his faith throughout his life and considered it of paramount importance. For example, he knew by heart and frequently used a selection of Catholic prayers in Latin. Some of these include the Lord's Prayer, the Hail Mary, and parts of the Litany of Loretto he translated into Kenya, which is his invented language. Tolkien had a deep love for Our Lady and a special devotion to St. John the Evangelist. A reference in a 1944 letter to his son Christopher shows that Tolkien participated in the 40 hours of devotion of adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. He held, in this instance, in the Church of St. Gregory and St. Augustine in Oxford. Indeed, Tolkien had a deep and special reverence for the Blessed Sacrament, writing to his son Michael that this is the one great thing on earth to love. The world that Tolkien invented was unparalleled in English literature. He was an expert in Norse mythology and mythology of many different lands, but especially Norse. And he was, in fact, so dismayed that England did not have its own history of myth-making that he decided that he was going to make one. Well, did he ever? The popularity of The Lord of the Rings defied probably even his considerable imagination. Since it was published, the book sold more than 150 million copies. Can you imagine? In a plethora of languages. And it was voted as the best piece of literature published in the 20th century by 4 major polls. Polls in England, even polls by Amazon in the US. It was the #1 work of literature produced in the 20th century. And that's remarkable to me. It spawned three animated series. If you go online, you can find those, and also the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings, which I think most of us now think of first when we think of the Lord of the Rings. It also inspired another TV series by Netflix called The Ring of Power, and that is the most expensive series ever done for TV. So his work keeps building. It's not over yet. What is so amazing, though, is that the tale is actually very, very Catholic. Of it, Tolkien wrote in a letter for The Lord of the Rings, is a fundamentally religious and Catholic work, unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically any in all references to anything like religion, to cults and practices in the imaginary world, for the religious element is absorbed into the story and in the symbolism. So I think it's kind of why people who don't profess to any kind of religion feel comfortable watching The Lord of the Rings, because these elements are a part of the story. It's like what was attributed to St. Francis: preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words. So the book is inherently Catholic, and so Catholic. And that's what drew me to it, to study it, because when I'd heard that, I said, well, I've never seen God in the book. I don't know what they're talking about. And I'm a theologian, so that was obviously something interesting. And a couple of books that I can recommend to anybody who's interested, 2 in particular. One is Joseph Pierce. I don't know if you can see that, if that's backwards or not, but it's called Tolkien, Man and Myth. And another one is The Philosophy of Tolkien by Peter Kraft. Those are excellent resources if you want to learn more about Tolkien. So we're going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. I would like you to listen to a few things as we review this book that will help you to see the religion in it and how he did not leave his faith behind when he wrote this. First are the symbols of light and dark. Okay, light is almost all uniformly good, and dark is almost uniformly evil. So he uses those very consistently throughout the book. Another one is pride and humility. Pride is the mother of all vices, and humility is the mother of all virtues. So please listen to these characters, where they appear proud, where they appear humble, and how they play into the story. It's quite significant. Also, throughout the storyline, characters are offered choices. That's something that is inherently Catholic. For instance, if you are familiar with Calvinism, which is one of the Protestant denominations, Calvinists believe in predestination. So if you were born and destined to go to heaven, you will go to heaven. If you're born and destined to go to hell, you will go to hell. There's nothing you can do to change these two things. That's predestination. Well, we Catholics don't believe that. We believe that God wants each of us in heaven, all of us in heaven, but he leaves us the choice as to if we are going to choose to go God's way or choose to go the other way. So just listen for the amount of choices that these characters are allowed all throughout the book to see where their heart really lies. So that is very cool. Also, in order to set the scenes properly, I need to give you a little bit of background. This is set in Middle Earth, which is, of course, the world that Tolkien invented, Middle Earth. And it had 3 ages. The first age is the age where the Middle Earth was formed, okay? And we can equate that to Genesis, when God created the sun and the moon and the stars, Okay, Tolkien had a god called Ilúvatar, and Ilúvatar created the universe, but the first thing he created were the angels. Ilúvatar wanted the most beautiful music that is so far beyond our imagination. He wanted that, and he wanted the angels to form a beautiful choir to produce this music. Well, there was one archangel, the mightiest archangel, and I think you know who we're talking about, decided he did not want to sing in harmony. That was not what he was interested in. So he started singing in discord. His music was discordant to the rest of the heavenly choir. So Ilúvatar tried to get him to sing in harmony. He would not do it. He was in revolt. And so Ilúvatar changed the melody to incorporate that discordant melody and made it beautiful. Isn't that something? Okay, so Melkor, the archangel, was eventually tossed out of heaven. Okay, again, who does that remind you of? But one of Melkor's lieutenants he sent to Earth. This lieutenant's job was to take over dominion of the Earth. So in the Second Age, we'll talk the Second Age now, the elves, that was the time of the elves, and the elves were very good. They were called the first children, and they were good. But Sauron, who's the lieutenant, Saur means lizard, S-A-U-R. So Sauron, you know, is evil. But he decided he was going to get dominion by pretending to be good. He roamed throughout the world, befriending people, helping them, advising them until he gained their trust. Again, who does this sound like? Okay? But Sauron was evil at heart. This was a role that he played to gain the trust of these different races. There were elves, dwarves, men, and hobbits. Hobbits, I think, came under the subtitle of men. So while he was trying to convince them that he was somebody good, he made these rings. And the 3 rings were for the elves, but actually Melkor had never actually touched those rings. I think he advised the elves of how to make them. He helped them share technology so they could make them, but he did not actually touch those. So those 3 elven rings were insulated from Melkor, or from Sauron. Sorry, I told you about the names. Okay, he made 7 rings for the dwarves, and these were beautiful rings, and he gave them to the royalty, the dwarf royalty, the upper echelon, 7 of them. 4 he gave to men. I mean, 9 he gave to men. So he gave these men to the kings of the earth, and they were mighty men, valiant, and they thought that he was a friend. So not knowing that these rings were actually Trojan horses, so to speak. They were evil. After he distributed the rings, Sauron made for himself 1 ring, and this was called the Great Ring of Sauron. And Sauron incorporated his soul into the ring, his spirit, his soul into this ring. So it became a part of him, and it was absolutely powerful, very corrupting, because at its soul, it was evil. But since it had a soul, it also had a certain life to it, a certain animation, like it could expand to fall off someone's finger, it could contract to stay on someone's finger. And it had a will, so it was always trying to get back to Sauron. And for Sauron's point, he wanted that ring because if he had it, there would be no stopping his dominion over Middle-earth. He would be unstoppable with the Ring of Power, with the elves and the men. Okay, so Sauron, the ring was lost the ring was lost for a long time. And how it got lost was Sauron had that ring and everyone else had their ring, and he came out in war against the rest of the world. And during the battle, he killed one of the kings who wore the ring, but his son ran up at the last moment with his father, and Sauron reached down with the hand that had the ring, and Isildur, the son of the king, cut his hand and cut the finger off that had the ring. So Sauron lost possession of his finger and the ring. So Isildur had the ring. Sauron, since it was his soul, he just kind of disintegrated. There was a certain part of him that was alive that went to the land of Mordor and stayed there till he plotted his revenge. Okay, so Isildur picked up the ring, and he was told, you have to destroy the ring. So Isildur, the only way to destroy it was to go to Mount Doom, where the ring was made, and drop it in. That was the only way. Mount Doom was the middle of Mordor. It was an awful hike. They got him there. Isildur refused to drop in the ring. He wanted to keep it so he could become powerful and destroy Sauron on his own. However, the ring is evil. He had it. The ring is animated. So as he wore the ring out, he was attacked by orcs one day, and he dove into a stream to swim away, and the ring expanded and fell off his finger. And he became visible to the orcs, and the orcs killed him. So the ring stayed at the bottom of the stream for like 3,000 years. A lot of people forgot about it, but there it was. Sauron never stopped looking for it because that was his soul, but he didn't know where it was. Well, one day, Gollum came along. Smeagol and Deagol were cousins, and they were fishing one day. Deagol fell in, found the ring, and picked it up. The effect that ring had on Deagol was manifested directly and immediately. So he picked it up and looked at it, and Smeagol came along and looked at it and said, "Give me the ring." And Deagol said, "No." So they ended up fighting for it, and Deagol was killed by Smeagol. So we can see the effects of that eagle on these two good hobbits, but very weak-willed hobbits, right away. That's what the ring does. Smeagol took the ring and kept it, and the longer he kept it, the more evil and base he became. He became a very vile creature, and he could only make one sound, and that was Gollum. So he began to be called Gollum throughout most of the story. He had lost his identity as Smeagol and became something very vile. So the one ring that Sauron had was actually, the elves wrote a little poem about it. And the poem is 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne. In the land of Mordor where the shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. In the land of Mordor where the shadows lie. Now the one part, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them, is inscribed into Sauron's 1 ring. And that's the identifying factor in that ring. That's how they could tell if this was Sauron's ring or if it was not. And it's curious, Joseph Pierce notes that 9 for mortal men doomed to die, in that single sentence mentions death more than any other line that he's ever read in English literature, which is far more extensive than what I have read in English literature. 9 for mortal is death, men die, doomed means die, and to die. So 4 words out of 7 refer to death. And Tolkien always called death the final defeat that all of us face. So he was very conscious of that, and that is also a theme that is built into this story. I also want to talk about the difference between allegory and symbolism, okay? Allegory is what C.S. Lewis does in the Chronicles of Narnia. We know that Aslan, the lion, is Jesus Christ. I mean, he starts with on foot with Jesus Christ. He goes through the story as Jesus Christ, and he dies as Jesus Christ, and he's resurrected as Jesus Christ. Okay, it's a constant throughout the story. Tolkien didn't care for allegories because he thought that with an allegory, the reader is always trying to read the author's mind. And he said, I don't want people in my head. I want them to think about the story. That's where I want their attention. So he did not use allegory. So he used symbolism. All right? The symbolism for the Great Ring is original sin. Okay? I'm giving you that one right off. Original sin is the Great Ring. So we'll see what effect that ring has on people when they get it. And you'll see the similarity, how that plays out. On the other hand, through the symbolism, the characters are not uniformly in the character of somebody from our theology. They move in and out. The Christ figure goes from character to character at different scenes throughout the story. So we're going to talk about that as well. Okay, now 60 years before this story takes place. This is another background you need to know. Bilbo, who was a hobbit. Now, hobbits are the world's most peaceful creatures. They're about 3.5 feet tall, so they're kind of small. Very big feet, kind of hairy. But their community was just almost like paradise. They were all considerate of each other. They loved each other. They were very earthy. They liked living from the earth. Their gardens were so important to them. So in nature, I mean, a lot of their homes were burrowed into the hill, but they were very fine homes in this hill. They just looked out for each other constantly. They're very considerate. An example I can give you is that the sheriff of Hobbiton, where they lived, had a feather in his cap. That was what set him apart, and his job was to make sure the lost cows went back to the owner. There just wasn't any crime. Some of them were kind of stupid. They're very simple folks, but some of them weren't. And we're going to read about the differences in some of these hobbits here. Bilbo was a hobbit. So Bilbo, one day, he was approached to go with a dozen dwarves in search of their homeland and their treasure. And he decides to go with them. Now that is The Hobbit right here, which is, it was written before Lord of the Rings. It's not as sophisticated, but it's a nice read. So he goes with the dwarves, and he gets lost in a mountain, inside a mountain, and falls down to the very bottom to these caverns there. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know how to get out. So he's feeling on the floor, and he finds a ring there. And he's perplexed what a ring could be doing at the floor of the cavern. Sticks in his pocket. And then he realizes that there's another creature in those caverns. That creature is Gollum. The same Gollum that picked up the ring. The book said 400 years earlier. The movie said 60 years earlier. But Gollum had the ring and lost it. He dropped it. And that's what Bilbo picked up, unbeknownst to Gollum. Now that Gollum finds out that Bilbo is there, and he says, great, lunch has arrived. He's ready to eat Bilbo. Well, Bilbo's not okay with that, as you can imagine. So he makes a deal with Gollum. He said, we're going to have a battle of wits. And if I win, you show me how to get out of this mountain. And if I lose, then I guess I'm lunch. So quite the battle of wits. Bilbo ends up winning that battle. And Gollum says, well, I'm going to eat you anyway. So I remember Gollum is a vile creature at this point. He's had this ring for so long. And so Bilbo is afraid he's going to get eaten, finds the ring in his pocket and sticks it on, and at once realizes that Gollum can't see him. Gollum agrees that he can't see him and says, oh no, he's found the way out of here. And so Gollum takes out where he thought Bilbo had gone, which is the way out of the mountain. So Bilbo actually follows Gollum as they come to the entrance of the mountain. Well, Bilbo has a choice to make. There's Gollum in front of him, this awful creature who tried to eat him. Bilbo has a knife, and he says, maybe I should kill him. And then he looks at him and says, I can't do that. He doesn't know I'm here. He's unarmed, and I pity him. So Bilbo decides not to kill Gollum, which is actually a critical decision in this book, and we're going to see out why in the very end. So Bilbo jumps over Frodo, runs away. The only mistake he made in that encounter is he told Gollum his name and where he lived. So Bilbo takes off, goes back home for the next 60 years. He lives very happily by himself. He has the ring, which is his most prized possession. And he finds out that a nephew of his is now an orphan. And he decides he's going to adopt that nephew, whose name is Frodo. So this is how Frodo comes into the story. Frodo will be Bilbo's heir, and his companion and his heir. So our story actually starts. These two share a common birthday. It actually starts at their birthday party. Bilbo turns 111 years old, and Frodo turns 33 years old. Now, there's a little bit of symbolism in here for you. 33 years old is the age that Christ was when he died, right? So, and Tolkien put these little things in there, so I'm trying to pick them out. And I've never read anything about the significance of Bilbo's age, which is 111. I haven't read anything, but I'm like, I know that's significant. So my theory is that 111 is the Trinity, 3 in one number. I think that's what it is. I think that's the symbolism that Tolkien wanted. So God forgive me, Tolkien forgive me if I'm wrong. That's my guess, okay? I'm laying my bets on that. All right. So Bilbo decides that he is leaving the Shire. And he says, now I'm going to introduce you to another character that we have coming in here, which is Gandalf. All right. Peter Kreeft said, here we also meet Gandalf the Wizard. As it turns out, Gandalf is also at the same level of heavenly hierarchy as Sauron, only he is good. Gandalf was an incarnate angel sent to Middle-earth as the great crisis of Sauron loomed on the horizon. So Gandalf is actually not a wizard. He's an angel of a lower caste. He's one of the Ainur. If you go back through the Silmarillion, I have trouble saying that word. I got it here someplace. There it is. Oh, lots of where in this one. Okay, that's a tough read. But if you go back there, you'll find out where Gandalf came from. He's from the heavenly angelic hierarchy. So he's not really a wizard. He was sent to Middle-earth to advise and guide those who are fighting Sauron. Okay? There are actually 7 of these angels sent to Earth. One is called Saruman, one is Sauron, and one is Radagast, who we meet here. And I don't know who the other 4 are, so maybe somebody else does, but I don't. So these are heavenly messengers, and I think of Gandalf as a guardian angel. Well, Gandalf has a particular soft spot for the hobbits. And it says earlier, I think it's in The Hobbit maybe, when Galadriel asks him, why the halflings? And he said, I think they give me courage. So we have the weak ones in the world giving the heavenly ones courage. Again, God said that he chose the weak ones of the world to show his strength. I can't remember where that is, but I know it's somewhere in the Bible. Okay. So at this birthday party, Bilbo decides he's going to make a grand exit for everyone. And he does. He announces that he's leaving, and he slips on the ring, becomes invisible, and goes back to his hobbit hole. And he's meaning to leave there to go live with the elves. Very dramatic. I mean, that's Bilbo. Okay, very dramatic. Okay, Gandalf sees this, though, and says, how did that happen? Is it possible that Bilbo has Sauron's ring? Is that possible? And he doesn't know. So he makes his way back to the hobbit hole, and there's this beautiful scene in the movie where Gandalf confronts him and says, you shouldn't use that ring lightly, right? And Bilbo says to him, I feel like a pat of butter that's scraped over too much bread, and I know that's not right. He's 111 years old. He's already way past the oldest of the hobbits. He hasn't aged at all. That was from the ring. And also this feeling that he is worn is also due to the ring. Okay? He doesn't know that, but he just knows something is not right. So as he's deciding to leave. So Gandalf does something remarkable at that point. Bilbo says he's leaving everything he has to Frodo, and he's leaving. So Gandalf says, what about the ring? Aren't you going to leave him the ring? And he persuades Bilbo to actually leave the ring. And this is remarkable because all through the story, no one is able to consciously give up the ring except the hobbits. They're the only ones. So, interesting reason why the hobbits are so humble. They are not proud. That's why their society works at the level that it does, because they're all constantly thinking of the other, not of themselves. And that level of humility allows them some protection against the ring. As original sin, okay. So Bilbo leaves the ring and goes off. He's going to visit the dwarves. He was invited in The Hobbit to come back anytime. So he decides he's going to do that. Frodo comes in and finds the ring and says, where's Bilbo? Picks up the ring, not knowing what it is. And Gandalf says, yeah, he's left everything to you, including the ring, urges him to keep the ring hidden, not to talk about it. And he leaves to research this ring to see if it could possibly be Sauron's ring. So Frodo puts it away. In the book, it talks about Gandalf being gone for 9 years. I don't think it's that long in the movies. I don't think they state how long it is in the movies, but Gandalf goes, he's scouring documents, looking for information on Sauron's ring, and reads that if it's immersed in fire, then the script that we read earlier, you can see the engraving on their ring, one ring to rule them all. So he comes back to Frodo, demands to see the ring, throws it in the fire, brings it up, and indeed there is the script of Mordor in the ring, and he knows that this is Sauron's ring. Okay? Now, during that 9 years, he actually found Gollum, who was left behind in the caverns after Bilbo left, and asks, to find out what he knows. And he discovers that Gollum had been captured by Sauron and told him that the ring was in the possession of a Baggins in the Shire. This is not good news. because now Sauron knows where the ring is. He had thought it was lost previously. Now he knows where it is. Gandalf runs back to Frodo, and they talk, and he throws the ring in the fire, brings it up, there's the script. And then Gandalf has to tell Frodo what this ring is about. And he says, a mortal Frodo who keeps one of the great rings does not die, but he does not grow or obtain more life. He merely continues until at the very last minute is a weariness. And if he often uses the ring to make himself invisible, he fades. He becomes in the end invisible permanently and walks in the twilight under the eye of the dark power that rules the ring. Yes, sooner or later if he is strong or well-meaning to begin with, but neither strength nor good purpose will last. Sooner or later, the dark power will devour him. Not good news. And then we learned that the 9 rings that were given to men, these men never died. They faded, they became invisible, and they stayed as Sauron's servants. And they got the new name of Ringwraiths. They are Ringwraiths, and they are terrifying. I'm just going to read a little bit in here, because I usually work with PowerPoints, but PowerPoints can't do justice to Tolkien's work. His words are everything here. So he said, it was one of the most strangest events in the whole history of the ring so far. Bilbo's arrival just at that time in the caverns and putting his hand on it blindly in the dark. There was more than one power at work, Frodo. The ring was trying to get back to its master. It had slipped from Isildur's hand and betrayed him. And when the chance came, it caught poor Deagle, and he was murdered, and after that Gollum, and it had devoured him. It could make no further use of him. He was too small and mean, and as long as it stayed with him, he would never leave his deep pool again. So now when its master was awake once more and sending out his dark thoughts from Mirkwood, it abandoned Gollum, only to be picked up by the most unlikely person imaginable, Bilbo from the Shire. Behind that there is something else at work, something beyond any design of the ringmaker. I can put it no plainer than by saying that Bilbo was meant to find the ring, and not by its maker, in which case you were meant to have it. And that might be an encouraging thought. It is not, said Frodo. I don't know why the movies cut that line off. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, to hear all this and then saying, it's encouraging that you have the ring. I mean, let's be honest. It is not encouraging for Frodo that he has the ring. It's terrifying. So Frodo is lamenting Gollum's existence, and he said, why didn't Bilbo kill that creature when he had the chance? What a pity that Bilbo did not stab that vile creature when he had the chance. Pity, said Gandalf. It was pity that stayed his hand, pity and mercy, not to strike without need. And he has been well rewarded, Frodo. Be sure that he took so little hurt from the evil and escaped in the end because he began his ownership of the ring so, with pity. And then Frodo says, but he deserves death. And Gandalf says, deserves it? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be too eager to deal out death in judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all the ends. I have not much hope that Gollum can be cured before he dies, but there is a chance of it. And he is bound up with the fate of the ring, Gandalf says. My heart tells me that he has some part to play yet, for good or for ill, before the end. And when that comes, the pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many, yours not the least. So how prophetic is that? That's quite prophetic. So please remember that line. So he presents to Frodo. Frodo is like, well, we'll hide the ring. And Gandalf says, no, because Sauron knows where you are. and he knows the ring is here. So that's really terrifying, right? He said, I can't hide it. And he said, no, it must be destroyed. And Frodo says, I really do wish to destroy it, cried Frodo, or, well, to have it destroyed. I am not made for perilous quests. I wish I had never seen the ring. Why did it come to me? Why was I chosen? Such questions cannot be answered, said Gandalf. You may be sure it was not for any merit that others do not possess, not for power or wisdom at any rate, but you have been chosen, and you must therefore use such strength and heart and wits as you have. You have been chosen. By who? By who? Not Sauron. Tolkien is talking about God here. This is God, the LOTR. This is God planning this. Chose Frodo in spite of the fact that he feels so ill-equipped to deal with this. But I have so little of any of these. He's talking about strength of heart and wits. Frodo does not feel qualified. You are wise and powerful. Will you not take the ring? No, cried Gandalf, springing to his feet. With what power I should have, power too great and terrible. Over me the ring would gain a power still greater and more deadly. His eyes flashed and his face was lit as by a fire within. Do not tempt me, for I do not wish to become like the Dark Lord himself. Yet the way of the ring to my heart is by pity, pity for weakness and a desire of strength to do good. Do not tempt me. I dare not take it, not even to keep it safe, unused. The wish to wield it would be too great for my strength. I shall have such need of it. Great perils lie before me. So Gandalf realizes the issue. Frodo can take the ring because he's humble, and because he just has no desire for it. That's what insulates him from the power of the ring. But Gandalf knows how dangerous it is. He's already powerful, and he fears the ring will take him over. And he's right. So then Gandalf says to Frodo, and now, said the wizard, turning back to Frodo, the decision lies with you. So Gandalf is asking Frodo, what are we going to do? What are you going to do with the ring? It's your decision. It's your choice. Again, we talked about choices at the beginning. But that's the way. Frodo has to be willing to take the ring out. So it's time for a decision for Frodo. He says, it seems that I am a danger to all that live near me. I cannot keep the ring and stay here. I ought to leave Bag End, leave the Shire, leave everything and go away. He sighs. I should like to save the Shire, if I could. Though there have been times when I thought the inhabitants too stupid and dull for words, and I have felt that an earthquake or an invasion of dragons might be good for them. But I don't feel that way now. I feel that as long as the Shire lies behind, safe and comfortable, I shall find wandering more bearable. I shall know that somewhere there is a firm foothold, even if my feet cannot stand there again. So Frodo knows the cost of carrying this ring. He knows he might have to leave his home and never come back. But still, his motivation for taking the ring, for saying yes to this mission that he has been entrusted to, is to protect his family and his community. And that is the best possible reason, and that's why Frodo is so uniquely suited to take this ring. So we're going to take a break now. Please come back for the next video, and we will continue on with our story. Thank you so much for listening.